Leg weakness usually begins earlier than most people realize, and by the time you notice it, the process has been quietly underway for years. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever you are in the world, I am asking you to set aside for a moment what you are doing, because in the next several minutes, I am going to share with you information that can genuinely transform the way you move, the way you feel, and the way you live for the rest of your life. Here is something that most doctors will never tell you openly in their office. Your legs are not getting weaker simply because you are aging. They are getting weaker because nobody told you what to eat. And there is a fundamental difference between those two observations. One is a sentence, the other is a solution. I am Dr. William Lee, and today I am going to give you that solution. 6 specific foods, ranked from highly beneficial to absolutely transformational, that can rebuild leg strength, restore muscle tissue, and return the stability and confidence you thought you had lost forever. But before we get to the list, I need to give you the biological context that makes these 6 foods more than a simple dietary recommendation, because once you understand what is actually happening inside the muscles of your legs as you age, the specific mechanisms of these foods will make complete sense, rather than simply being things you are told to eat and trust. The process of age-related muscle loss has a clinical name, sarcopenia, and sarcopenia is not simply a lack of exercise, though inactivity accelerates it dramatically. It is a complex biological shift involving changes in hormonal signaling, protein metabolism, mitochondrial function, neuromuscular communication, and chronic inflammation that together create a consistent, progressive loss of muscle mass and strength that begins as early as age 30 and accelerates sharply after 60. The muscles most affected in the early stages of sarcopenia are the slow-twitch, stabilizing muscles of the lower body, the quadriceps, the gluteus medius, the calf muscles, the deep hip stabilizers, precisely the muscles responsible for standing up, walking, climbing stairs, maintaining balance, and recovering from a stumble before it becomes a fall. The reason the legs go first is not random. These muscles are load-bearing constantly throughout the waking hours, which means they demand more energy, more repair, and more nutritional support than almost any other muscle group. When the nutritional environment is inadequate, the legs are the first to show the deficit. And by the time most people notice their legs feeling tired, heavy, or unreliable in ways they did not feel 5 or 10 years ago, the underlying muscle loss has been accumulating for years without visible symptoms. There are 3 specific biological mechanisms that drive this process, and that the 6 foods I'm about to describe address in direct and targeted ways. Understanding these 3 mechanisms is what makes the difference between eating these foods occasionally and eating them with the biological intelligence that produces real, measurable results. The first mechanism is anabolic resistance. After the age of 60, the muscle's ability to use dietary protein for muscle protein synthesis, the process of building and repairing muscle tissue, becomes significantly less efficient. In a young adult, consuming 20 to 30 grams of protein at a meal produces a robust and rapid muscle protein synthetic response. In an older adult, the same protein dose produces a blunted response because the signaling pathways that translate protein availability into muscle-building activity become less sensitive. This means older adults need not just adequate protein, but protein that is especially rich in the specific amino acids that most efficiently overcome this anabolic resistance, particularly leucine, which is the primary molecular key that activates the mTOR signaling pathway responsible for initiating muscle protein synthesis. The second mechanism is mitochondrial dysfunction. The mitochondria are the energy-producing organelles inside each muscle cell. In aged muscle, mitochondrial density decreases, the efficiency of each remaining mitochondria declines, and the capacity for aerobic energy production that sustains endurance and resists fatigue is significantly reduced. This mitochondrial decline means that muscle cells have less energy available for both contraction and for the energy-intensive process of protein synthesis. Nutrients that support mitochondrial function and biogenesis, the creation of new mitochondria, directly address one of the root causes of muscle fatigue and weakness in older adults. The third mechanism is chronic systemic inflammation. The same low-grade chronic inflammation that drives cardiovascular disease, metabolic dysfunction, and cognitive decline also directly attacks muscle tissue through a process that researchers call inflammatory sarcopenia. Inflammatory cytokines, particularly TNF-alpha and interleukin-6 produced by activated immune cells and by visceral adipose tissue, activate the ubiquitin proteasome system in muscle cells, which is the cellular machinery that degrades proteins. When the inflammatory environment is chronically elevated, this protein degradation system works faster than muscle synthesis can compensate, producing net muscle loss regardless of how much protein the person consumes. Foods with potent anti-inflammatory mechanisms address sarcopenia at this root level, rather than simply trying to outsupply the degradation with more protein. Now let us go through the 6 foods, from the most beneficial to the most transformational. Number 6 is eggs. And I start with eggs because they represent the single most direct answer to the anabolic resistance problem I described. And because of all the foods in this list, they are the most universally accessible, the most affordable, and the most consistently underconsumed by older adults who have been given outdated dietary advice about cholesterol. The current consensus from the major cardiological societies, including the American Heart Association, in its most recent dietary guidelines, is that dietary cholesterol from whole eggs has minimal effect on cardiovascular risk in the vast majority of healthy adults. What eggs do have is the highest biological value protein of any whole food, meaning the proportion of the amino acid content that can be directly utilized for muscle protein synthesis is greater than chicken, greater than beef, greater than dairy, and dramatically greater than any plant protein source. This is measured by a metric called the Protein Digestibility Corrected Amino Acid Score, or PDCAAS, and eggs consistently score at or near the maximum of 1.0. But the specific reason eggs are essential for overcoming anabolic resistance in older adults is their leucine content. A single large egg contains approximately 550 milligrams of leucine, and 2 eggs provide over 1 gram, which approaches the threshold of leucine intake associated with maximal activation of the mTOR signaling pathway in aged muscle tissue. Research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition comparing the muscle protein synthetic response to whole eggs versus an equivalent amount of egg whites found that whole eggs produced a significantly greater anabolic response than egg whites at equivalent protein doses, confirming that components of the egg yolk, including fatty acids, micronutrients, and choline, contribute to the anabolic response beyond the protein alone. Choline, which is present in very high concentrations in the egg yolk, is a precursor to acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter at the neuromuscular junction that transmits the signal from the motor nerve to the muscle fiber. Adequate choline status is essential for the efficiency of the neural signal that activates muscle contraction, and choline deficiency, which affects a significant proportion of older adults, contributes directly to impaired neuromuscular coordination that manifests as perceived leg weakness and reduced balance performance. 2 to 3 whole eggs daily, prepared with minimal added fat and consumed with vegetables for micronutrient synergy, provide a foundational protein and micronutrient base for leg muscle rebuilding that no other single food matches. Number 5 is salmon, specifically wild-caught salmon, and its position at 5 is because its mechanisms go beyond protein and address both the mitochondrial and the inflammatory dimensions of muscle aging simultaneously. Wild salmon is extraordinarily rich in EPA and DHA, the long-chain omega-3 fatty acids that have the most direct and well-documented effects on skeletal muscle biology of any dietary fat. EPA and DHA are incorporated directly into the phospholipid membranes of muscle cell mitochondria, and their incorporation changes the physical properties of those membranes in ways that enhance mitochondrial function. Mitochondrial membranes rich in EPA and DHA are more fluid, which improves the efficiency of the electron transport chain enzymes that produce ATP. Mitochondrial membranes depleted of EPA and DHA are stiffer, which reduces this enzymatic efficiency and contributes to the mitochondrial dysfunction of sarcopenia. The anti-inflammatory mechanism of EPA is equally important. EPA competes with arachidonic acid, the omega-6 fatty acid, for the cyclooxygenase and lipoxygenase enzymes that produce inflammatory prostaglandins and leukotrienes. When the cellular ratio of EPA to arachidonic acid is high, the balance of eicosanoid production shifts toward anti-inflammatory mediators, reducing the TNF-alpha and interleukin-6 production that drives the inflammatory sarcopenia I described. A randomized controlled trial published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that omega-3 fatty acid supplementation, equivalent to 2 to 3 servings of salmon weekly, produced a significant increase in the rate of muscle protein synthesis in adults over 65, independent of any change in protein intake or physical activity. The omega-3s were making the muscle more anabolically responsive, more capable of building and repairing tissue from the protein available. Wild salmon also contains astaxanthin, the carotenoid pigment that gives it its characteristic pink-red color, and that is one of the most potent antioxidants in nature. Astaxanthin has demonstrated in research from Keio University a specific protective effect on mitochondrial membrane integrity in muscle cells under oxidative stress, preserving the energy-producing capacity of the mitochondria during and after exercise. This translates clinically to reduced muscle fatigue and faster recovery, both of which are directly relevant to the functional leg strength that older adults need for daily activities. 3 servings of wild salmon weekly, each approximately 4 to 6 ounces, provides the EPA, DHA, and astaxanthin combination associated with measurable improvements in muscle anabolic sensitivity and mitochondrial function in the research literature. Number 4 is lentils. And lentils occupy this position because they address a specific aspect of leg muscle strength that neither eggs nor salmon can touch. And that is the role of the gut microbiome in regulating the inflammatory environment of muscle tissue through the production of short-chain fatty acids. Lentils are extraordinarily rich in resistant starch and soluble fiber, both of which serve as the primary fermentable substrates for butyrate-producing bacteria in the colon. Butyrate, the short-chain fatty acid produced by this fermentation, is one of the most potent natural anti-inflammatory compounds the body produces, and its effects on muscle health are more direct and more significant than most people realize. Butyrate enters the systemic circulation through the portal vein, and at the muscle, it inhibits histone deacetylase enzymes, which are the same enzymes that silence pro-regenerative genes in aging muscle cells. By inhibiting these enzymes, butyrate allows the re-expression of genes involved in muscle satellite cell activation, which are the stem cells responsible for muscle repair and regeneration. A study published in the Journal of Cachexia, Sarcopenia, and Muscle found that butyrate supplementation in aged mice restored satellite cell activation capacity and muscle regenerative response to levels comparable to young animals. And while direct clinical trials in older humans are still accumulating, the mechanistic evidence and the consistency of findings in preclinical models have led multiple sarcopenia researchers to identify gut microbiome-derived butyrate as one of the most important and most overlooked factors in the modulation of muscle aging. Lentils also contain approximately 18 grams of protein per cooked cup, with a meaningful leucine content that contributes to the mTOR anabolic signaling alongside the butyrate mechanism. And their iron content, approximately 6.6 milligrams per cup, addresses one of the most common and most undertreated contributors to leg fatigue and weakness in older adults. Iron deficiency anemia, which affects a significant proportion of adults over 65, especially women, reduces the oxygen-carrying capacity of the blood and produces the leg heaviness, fatigue during minimal exertion, and reduced endurance that are frequently misattributed to age-related muscle weakness alone. Half a cup to 1 cup of cooked lentils 3 to 4 times per week, combined with a vitamin C source such as tomato or citrus to enhance non-heme iron absorption, provides the butyrate precursor, protein, and iron combination that makes lentils specifically valuable for leg strength in older adults. Number 3 is beets. And beets occupy the 3rd position because their specific mechanism for leg muscle performance is one of the most directly validated in human clinical research, and because it addresses a dimension of muscle function that no other food on this list covers as specifically. The muscles of the legs depend not only on protein and mitochondrial health, but on the efficiency of oxygen delivery through the circulatory system. No matter how well built the muscle fibers are, if the blood vessels supplying them cannot dilate adequately to increase blood flow in response to exercise demand, the muscle will fatigue rapidly and performance will be limited. This capacity for exercise-induced vasodilation, called functional hyperemia, depends on the production of nitric oxide by the endothelial cells lining the blood vessels. After the age of 60, endothelial nitric oxide synthase, the enzyme that produces nitric oxide, becomes less active, the vascular endothelium is more oxidatively stressed, and the vasodilatory response to exercise demand is blunted. This is one of the reasons older adults feel that their legs give out faster during activities that their muscles should theoretically be strong enough to handle. Beets are the richest dietary source of inorganic nitrates that converts to nitric oxide through the nitrite-nitrite-nitric oxide pathway I have discussed in detail in previous videos on this channel. When you consume beet nitrates, they are converted to nitrites by oral bacteria and then to nitric oxide in the blood vessels under the low oxygen conditions that occur precisely when muscles are working hard. This dietary nitrate pathway bypasses the age-related decline of ENOS and restores nitric oxide production through an entirely different biochemical route, producing vasodilation and increased blood flow to working leg muscles. The clinical evidence for this mechanism in the context of leg muscle performance is extraordinary. A study published in the Journal of Applied Physiology gave older adults concentrated beet juice, providing 400 milligrams of dietary nitrate or placebo, and measured leg muscle blood flow and power output during standardized exercise. The beet juice group showed a 38% improvement in leg muscle blood flow and a 13% improvement in maximum leg power output compared to placebo. These are not marginal effects. These are the kinds of performance improvements that translate directly to being able to walk further, climb more stairs, and recover more quickly from activities that previously exhausted the legs. Half a cup to 1 cup of cooked beets 3 to 4 times weekly, or 4 to 6 ounces of pure beet juice without added sugar the same frequency, provides the dietary nitrate dose associated with these vascular performance benefits. The reminder about antibacterial mouthwash is important here. Do not use it before consuming beets, as it eliminates the oral bacteria essential for the nitrate to nitrite conversion that initiates the entire pathway. Number 2 is dark leafy greens, specifically kale, spinach, and Swiss chard, and they occupy the second position because their contribution to leg strength operates through a mechanism that is perhaps the most physiologically fundamental of any food on this list: the regulation of the contractile process itself. Every muscle contraction, from the smallest stabilizing microcontraction to the most powerful extension of the quadriceps, depends on a precise choreography of calcium release and reuptake within the muscle fiber. Calcium is the molecular trigger for the contraction. When the motor nerve fires, calcium floods out of the sarcoplasmic reticulum into the cytoplasm of the muscle cell and binds to troponin, initiating the sliding filament mechanism that produces contraction. After contraction, calcium is pumped back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum by an enzyme called SERCA, which requires both energy and magnesium to function efficiently. And the entire calcium signaling cascade is regulated by vitamin K2, which activates matrix GLA protein, a calcium-binding protein that prevents inappropriate calcium deposition in soft tissues, including muscle fibers, while ensuring calcium is available for the contractile process when needed. Dark leafy greens provide the convergence of magnesium, vitamin K1 and K2, folate, and iron that together create the optimal biochemical environment for efficient muscle contraction and relaxation. Magnesium deficiency, which affects between 50 and 70% of adults over 65 in population studies, is one of the most commonly overlooked causes of muscle cramps, particularly the nighttime calf cramps that most older adults have been told are simply a fact of aging. They are not. They are a predictable consequence of inadequate intracellular magnesium impairing the SERCA pump's ability to efficiently clear calcium from the contractile apparatus after contraction. The folate in dark leafy greens addresses homocysteine metabolism, which connects to muscle health through a mechanism that is often overlooked. Elevated homocysteine, which is found in a significant proportion of older adults with inadequate folate and B12 intake, is directly toxic to the endothelium of the vessels supplying muscle tissue and directly impairs mitochondrial function in muscle cells through the oxidative stress it generates. Normalizing homocysteine through adequate folate from leafy greens is not just a cardiovascular intervention, it is a direct muscle protective intervention that operates through the same vascular health mechanisms that beet nitrate works to restore. 1 to 2 cups of cooked dark leafy greens daily, or 2 to 3 cups raw, rotated among kale, spinach, and Swiss chard to maximize the variety of micronutrient profiles, provide the magnesium, vitamin K, folate, and iron combination that makes this food category foundational for leg muscle function at any age. And now number 1, the most transformational food on this list. The one I have placed at the top, not because of the most dramatic single mechanism, but because it uniquely addresses all 3 of the biological drivers of sarcopenia simultaneously, because the clinical evidence for its benefits in older adults is among the most consistently replicated of any food in this category, and because it is one of the most underconsumed and most underappreciated foods in the standard Western diet over 60. That food is sardines. Specifically, whole sardines consumed with their soft, edible bones. I want to explain why sardines occupy this position above even salmon, despite both being fatty fish, because the distinction is important and the reasons are specific. Sardines provide the same EPA and DHA omega-3, anti-inflammatory, and mitochondria-supporting benefits as salmon, but sardines add 2 additional nutritional dimensions that salmon does not match in equivalent servings. The first is calcium from the edible bones. A single 3-ounce serving of canned sardines with bones contains approximately 350 milligrams of calcium, which is about 35% of the daily recommended intake in a single small serving. And this calcium is in a highly bioavailable form, the naturally occurring hydroxyapatite structure of the fish bone, which is absorbed more efficiently than the calcium carbonate in most supplements. Now, calcium and leg muscle strength have a connection that most people think of as being primarily about bone density, and bone density matters enormously for what happens when a fall occurs. But the more immediate connection between calcium and leg strength is at the level of the muscle fiber itself. As I described with the leafy greens, calcium is the molecular trigger for muscle contraction. But beyond its role in individual contractions, adequate dietary calcium is necessary for maintaining the calcium gradient across the muscle cell membrane that enables the rapid calcium release that initiates fast, powerful contractions. The type of contraction most critical for fall prevention is the reflexive, rapid, powerful contraction that corrects a stumble. This requires explosive calcium release. In muscle cells that are chronically calcium depleted at the intracellular level, this rapid contractile response is compromised, and the stumble becomes a fall before the muscle can generate the corrective force needed. The second dimension that elevates sardines above salmon is their vitamin D content. A single serving of sardines provides approximately 270 to 300 IU of vitamin D3, which is among the highest natural vitamin D concentrations available in any food. And the relationship between vitamin D and leg muscle strength is one of the most directly documented in the entire literature of nutrition and musculoskeletal medicine. Vitamin D receptors are present throughout the nucleus of every skeletal muscle cell. When vitamin D binds to these receptors, it activates the expression of genes involved in muscle protein synthesis, muscle fiber differentiation, calcium handling, and mitochondrial biogenesis. Vitamin D deficiency, which affects between 40 and 70% of adults over 65 in Northern Hemisphere populations, is directly associated with impaired muscle strength, reduced muscle mass, impaired balance, and dramatically elevated fall risk. A meta-analysis published in Osteoporosis International that analyzed data from 13 randomized controlled trials found that vitamin D supplementation produced significant improvements in muscle strength and balance performance in adults over 65 who were vitamin D insufficient, with the most pronounced effects in those with the greatest baseline deficiency. When I combine the EPA and DHA for mitochondrial function and anti-inflammatory protection with the highly bioavailable calcium for rapid contractile response and bone density, and with the vitamin D for muscle protein synthesis and neuromuscular function, all in a single inexpensive food that requires zero preparation beyond opening a can, sardines represent the single most nutritionally complete intervention for leg strength available in any grocery store. 2 to 3 servings of sardines per week, 3 ounces each, consumed with their bones, provides the combination of these 3 mechanisms that make sardines specifically transformational for leg muscle health in older adults. If the taste is unfamiliar, incorporating them into a pasta with olive oil and garlic, mashing them into avocado on whole grain bread, or adding them to a salad dressing gradually familiarizes the palate to a flavor that cultures with the highest longevity and best preserved physical function in older age have relied on for centuries. Now let me bring the 6 foods together as a system, because the biological logic of their combination is important. Eggs provide the highest biological value protein and the acetylcholine precursor choline for neuromuscular efficiency. Salmon provides EPA, DHA, and astaxanthin for mitochondrial support and anti-inflammatory protection. Lentils provide butyrate precursors for satellite cell activation and iron for oxygen delivery. Beets provide dietary nitrate for vascular vasodilation and leg muscle blood flow. Dark leafy greens provide magnesium, vitamin K, and folate for contractile efficiency and vascular health. And sardines provide the omega-3, calcium, and vitamin D combination that addresses the structural, functional, and hormonal dimensions of muscle aging simultaneously. Together, these 6 foods address protein synthesis, mitochondrial energy production, gut-derived anti-inflammatory signaling, vascular blood flow to working muscle, contractile machinery biochemistry, and the hormonal regulation of muscle development. No supplement protocol, however sophisticated, provides this breadth of simultaneous biological intervention through food. The practical implementation is straightforward. Eggs 2 to 3 times daily, sardines 2 to 3 times weekly, salmon 2 to 3 times weekly, lentils 3 to 4 times weekly, beets 3 to 4 times weekly, and dark leafy greens daily or near daily. This is not a restrictive diet. It is an additive strategy that builds around whatever eating pattern you already maintain, gradually introducing these foods with the frequency that the research associates with measurable outcomes. I want to close with the thought that motivated the title of this video, Your Legs Go First. Not because aging is inevitable in that specific way, but because the lower body musculature is the most energetically demanding, the most nutritionally sensitive, and the most directly affected by the combination of anabolic resistance, mitochondrial decline, and inflammatory muscle degradation that characterize sarcopenia. The legs tell you about the state of your muscles before any other part of the body does. When your legs begin to feel less reliable, it is not the beginning of an irreversible decline. It is a signal, and it is a signal that responds to the right nutritional inputs. The biology of muscle responds to what you feed it at any age. The satellite cells that rebuild muscle fibers respond to the butyrate from your lentils. The mitochondria respond to the EPA from your salmon. The contractile machinery responds to the magnesium from your leafy greens. The vascular endothelium responds to the nitrate from your beets. The neuromuscular junction responds to the choline from your eggs. And the whole system responds to the vitamin D and calcium from your sardines. 6 foods, available in every grocery store, affordable, practical, and backed by the most compelling body of nutritional science for muscle health in older adults that exists. Your legs are waiting for this information. Give it to them. I am Dr. William Lee. If this video gave you something valuable today, please share it with someone you love who has been struggling with leg weakness, fatigue, or balance concerns. Subscribe to this channel for more evidence-based health information for adults over 50, and leave me a comment below. Tell me which of these 6 foods you already eat regularly and which one you are going to add to your diet this week. Your legs are not done yet. Feed them what they need to prove it.